bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
All right, well, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, Monday evening. It's Monday. Back in the chair, Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. That's right. Today is Monday, May 1st. 120 days into the new year, just 245 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? Big week. Big week dead ahead. That's because this is our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. We do this every couple of months, right? Here we go. Amazing Women Week. We need an Amazing Men Week. I think that should be up next. Amazing Men on Fade to Black. But it is Amazing Women Week because tonight, to kick it off, to start it off, tonight we have Annie Jacobsen. She's here to talk about her new book, Phenomenon, The Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis. Tomorrow night, Caroline Corey is here to discuss her new film, Gods Among Us. Wednesday night, Tricia Eastman and biohacking. Thursday night is another Fader Night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom live. There you go. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, Facebook, YouTube, everything's Fade to Black, Jimmy Church Radio. Easy enough to do, easy enough to figure out. Just click on those three little buttons there on the website. I think you can get it done. The Sandbox, come and hang out with us tonight, as in every night on the show. The Sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter. Now, everybody asks, because hashtag F2B means nothing. It's just a hashtag, right? But if you have TweetDeck, hashtag F2B is now a column of tweets in a row, all with the hashtag F2B in it. That's all you got to do. Get TweetDeck, get it going. Now, I do this like every single day. I get an email from somebody. Dude, okay, I got it. I got TweetDeck. But, I can't figure it out. Just hashtag F2B. Tell everybody you're a fade or not. We're going to see it pop up in our feed here, and somebody will come to the rescue. I promise. Nobody will ignore you. Hashtag F2B. Come hang out in the Sandbox. You can email throughout the show, Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. If you have any questions or comments during the show, hashtag F2BQ, because I have a Fade to Black question column right there in TweetDeck. Hashtag F2BQ. All right. Ah, man, what a weekend that we had around here. Just absolutely amazing. I want to, we posted up the pictures. I want to thank Carol Peralt right now. She's such a great artist, and I know she's listening right now. She surprised me. I guess Rita knew it was coming. I didn't know. With a couple of amazing paintings, and one for Rita, one for myself. And we posted the pictures of it. Rita, if you could, post those up in real time for everybody to see. The one for Rita was, the theme was Cicada 3301. Amazing. And the one that she painted for the bunker was some aliens at a cafe drinking fade to black coffee. Very, very, very cool. So talented. Again, I was completely surprised, completely blown away. And thank you, Carol. All right. And it's come down to the point now. I'm going to rearrange the bunker somewhat because I have to have like a Carol Peralta wall. I've got so many, and they're just amazing. So just thank you so much, Carol. Okay. Where are we at? Subscribe to our podcast. We have over 600 archive shows, custom apps, Apple and Android for the podcast. Just $2 a month. Go to jimmychurchradio.com. Click on the podcast banner. $2 a month. That's all you got to do. Apple Store, iStore, Google Store, search Fade to Black, download the app, and then go and get it. It's just $2 a month. Help support the show. It's great. Also, check out all of our sponsors. Life Change Tea, getthetea.com. Ronnie McMullen is going to be here in a couple of minutes for Life Change Tea. Just go to the banners over at getthetea or jimmychurchradio.com. Takes you to getthetea.com. Use the promo code Jimmy, either over the phone or online when you order. You're going to get yourself some free shipping. Also, River Moon Coffee. Again, Fade to Black blend, the best coffee on planet Earth. There's no question about that. And trust me, I know coffee. Nobody on planet Earth knows coffee like I do. I know my coffee. Fade to Black blend is what you need to drink. It is the best. It's the best. It's dark, but it doesn't have, those people that don't like dark coffee. You'll love this. Oh, man. It's just so good. Just click on the River Moon Coffee banner. Hashtag, or the promo code is F2B Blend. You can hashtag F2B Blend, too, if you want. All right, all of our sponsors, Studio Dome speakers. This Thursday, we will hold our drawing and give away the Studio Dome speaker package, and which is a stereo Bluetooth stereo system, right? 2 SBB2 speakers in a hard shell case, and get your name in. All you have to do is go to our membership area and sign up, become a member. And what you should really do is get the Game Changer. Become a game-changing Fadernaut. You're going to get an autographed hat. You're going to get the T-shirt, the full package, full year subscription, and it's right there. Just go to our membership area. Don't forget, we've just got a few short days left before we cut things off for the drawing that we will do live on the air this Thursday. Contact in the Desert's coming up May 19th through the 22nd. I cannot believe it. We are less than 3 weeks away. Joshua Tree, California. Tickets and info over at jimmychurchradio.com. We have 3 big events that we're doing at Contact this year. We're broadcasting live, Fade to Black, Friday night from the Lotus Room. Saturday night, I'm hosting the Forbidden Archaeology panel in the amphitheater at 7 p.m. Sunday night, I'm hosting the Disclosure and Government Cover-Up panel, again, at the amphitheater at 7 p.m. That's Sunday night. So we have 3 great events going on that weekend. The best speakers out there are at Contact in the Desert. Tickets and info, food and lodging, and everything that you need is over at jimmychurchradio.com. And I also want to remind everybody that, yes, we will be at ESETI Ranch for their July 4th weekend conference, and it is okay. I'm sorry. Just had a text come in on my phone, and I couldn't read it. I sort of read it. Okay. We've got texting problems right now. One of our computers is not connecting to the other studio, and it's like, oh, man. So now we've got a text by phone. Anyway, ESETI Ranch, July 4th weekend. We will be up there. I think I am speaking twice that weekend, okay? And but the big events are happening at night. Night vision and all of the contact that we are going to do in the stars. So that's July 4th weekend. We should have all of the info up for July 4th and ESETI up in the next couple of days. So we'll have all the info that you need over at jimmychurchradio.com. But all of you Fadernauts, you've all wanted to do what we're going to do, which is go up to ESETI and hang out for a weekend. That's a bucket list, right? That's something you need to check off on the bucket list. ESETI Ranch, we're doing it this year. We want all of you to come up and hang out with us. All right. I've got Ronnie McMullen here. I'm going to get to him in just a second. I want to get a couple of things out of the way really quick before I get to Ronnie, but he is in the batter's box. Really quick, let's get this show cracking. Happy birthday to today. Director Wes Anderson is 48 years old. He's one of the greats, one of my favorites. Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, The Royal Tenenbaums, The Life Aquatic, The Darjeeling Limited, Moonrise Kingdom, and the Grand Budapest Hotel. He's got a new movie right now in production, and it's another stop. It's like The Amazing Mr. Fox. I think it's a stop animation film, so he's working on that right now. Okay. Rita says the Spreaker promos are over. It's May 1st. Oh, okay. All right. She says, I guess according to the rules that we have posted, they're over. Were we going to do the drawing today? I thought we were doing it on the 4th. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Rita. Then I'll change the rules right now. Go ahead. Go to the membership area. We'll extend it through Wednesday. All right. There you go. On this day in history, 1960, American U-2 spy plane shot down over Russia, piloted by Francis Gary Powers, who survived. Fact or fact, in 2009, Jamie Thomas Rassett was fined $1.9 million for illegally downloading 24 songs. That's $80,000 per song. Her case was the first such copyright infringement ever to go to trial in the United States. Now, what I couldn't find out is if they actually went through with that and forced her. You know, I'm wondering if she's got... Can you imagine for the rest of your life giving away, 25%, having that... Could you imagine? Oh, man. Certainly they didn't enforce that, but I couldn't find anything out about it. Jamie Thomas Rassett, $1.9 million for 24 songs. All right. On the line, the one and only Ronnie McMullen. Ronnie, good evening.
How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm doing good, man. You got the pipes of doom, dude. The pipes of doom. Ronnie McMullen, everybody from Life Change Tea. Ronnie, welcome. The first week of the month, every month when we bring you on the show, it's such a bright spot for me. Is it the same for you? Do you look forward to coming out and hanging out with us?
I do. You're the big kahuna. You're the man. You're number one in radio. You bet.
Oh, you said that to Sean Hannity, too. Hey,
yeah. Me and Sean, we're buddies.
Yeah, you and Sean.
Not.
So, did you hear that the guy that replaced Roger Ailes, over at Fox, he resigned today, Bill Shine.
Wow.
So, yeah.
They're having a bit of a ruckus over at Fox, aren't they?
Yeah. Speaking of Hannity, right? So, anyway, the point being, it was Roger Ailes, O'Reilly, now Bill Shine. That's the top three guys over there. I suppose that you could call Sean Hannity the big star over at Fox. It's certainly not Tucker. Tucker's a doofus. Tucker used to be great, but, I don't know now. I like the old Tucker. But is Sean Hannity the big kahuna over at Fox? I mean, really? Is that what this has come down to?
Sean's a big boy, and he's kind of in trouble too, because he was stating this last week that he's hiring a team of lawyers, and he's not putting up with these people saying things about him and everything else. And so, if he's got to hire a team of lawyers, not a good position.
Right.
That's just my thought.
He can't, the problem with Sean is he cares about what people say about him.
He says he doesn't, but you are so right.
Yeah.
The other thing about Sean that cracks me up is I think he gets an arm ache because he's always patting himself on the back. So nobody can pat him on the back because he's too busy doing it himself.
Yeah. I want to move on off of Sean because I tell you why. there was a moment in time when he was, he's a San Diego guy, right? He was Southern California. And he was like tolerable, listenable, right? And I don't know what you can't in this industry. Let me tell you what you can't do in this industry. You cannot let what people are going to talk, right? People are going to talk. You can't control that. You cannot control it. So wasting your time trying to control what people think about you or say about you is a waste of energy. And that's lesson one in this industry, because then it, A, takes you off your game, which means that people that are talking about you win. That's the first thing. And the second thing is it changes you as a person. It changes you. Who you were on the air when you first started writing books, when you first started in journalism, when you first started painting pictures, writing songs in a band, whatever it is, when you're in the, in that creative thing, you don't care what people think, and you're a rebel. Oh, I don't care what people say. I'm doing my own thing, right? Okay. And as soon as you start to listen to people, you change. And that's exactly the opposite of who you thought you were when you were a kid, when you didn't care what people said, including your parents. Right? Am I right?
And money changes the game. Can you do this? We'll just give you some of this money right here. You don't have to do it just like this. Just kind of go this direction. and until pretty soon you're making 10 mil as a talk show host that's been totally bought off. Right.
And again, you can do it and pick and choose. When you first start off, I get it. You're struggling to have a car payment. Maybe you're even just trying to buy a car, right? And you're trying, I get that. And money is more important back then. But as you go through your career, that money should become less and less important to you because you're not worrying about it anymore, right? And it shouldn't change you. For some reason, it does. Look at everybody in Washington, D.C., Ronnie. Everybody that was elected, everybody that first time you run, the first time you're city council and you're doing your thing, you have morals and goals, and you represent your constituents and your neighbors and the people that and you want to go fight the good fight. The second you get to Washington D.C., it all changes. That day it changes. How wonderful. I know that you've thought about this a lot, and how wonderful would it be in this country if lobbying was illegal?
Oh, right? That would be, that'd be good. Yeah. That'd be real good.
I mean, completely illegal.
Wait, there's a home run.
Yeah, completely illegal. You spent money in Washington, D.C. to do what? Right? And put that CEO in prison, right, from the company, and Absolutely. Put the lobbyist in jail, whoever got caught doing it, throw the congressman or senator out of office. You know what I mean? Yeah. Think about that for a second. Just made it illegal. That would change things. All of that money that is, wasted, would go somewhere else into the economy, hopefully. But just think about that for a second.
I think the same way about mass media.
Yeah,
mass media goes a certain way too, based on not necessarily lobbyists, but certain influential people, and changes really the news into more of propaganda.
Yeah.
So if we could just have the news, not the spin, I mean, they're telling you, but Bill O'Reilly, no spin. He's telling you right there, I'm spinning.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm not going to eat. That means you're going to go pork out, So
well, see, and that's why I love bringing you on this show, because, we should be, talking about you and your products. But I think that listeners need to understand, who is behind Life Change Tea and what a great company that it is, and that you're a real person and you're down to earth, your feet are on the ground, and you care, and that's one of the things, because you and I could just sit and talk all night. I really appreciate that about you. What's new over at Life Change Tea, speaking of that?
Well, here's something new, just news-wise, and it's not really new, but it's something for all the geoengineering, climate change, chemtrail. We have different names for it. I think they and them change the names just so we can't track them. But for those people that want to know, are we being bombarded by this, or is this conspiracy theory? And this is going to be heading towards those that might think this is conspiracy theory. It's actually up now, geoengineering.environment.harvard education. This is at Harvard University. Advancing Science and Technology, Harvard's Solar Geoengineering Research Program will develop methods that might reduce the risks and improve the efficiency of solar geoengineering. So this is telling you not only is it there, but it's been there for quite some time to have a whole research program. And it goes into how they're going to spray us. And the reason I'm talking like this is because this has been a battle of mine. This has been something close to my heart because we're being sprayed, we're being poisoned. And everybody goes, oh, that's conspiracy theory. And you go, well, yeah, I guess it is, because I really don't have any proof in my pocket. And you can interview scientists, and which I have, and all these people, but it really doesn't hold a candle. But when it's up, okay, and it's up on Harvard education, on Harvard University,
right,
then they're kind of telling you, here we go. This is, now we're rocking. Because I don't know about you, Jimmy, but I know you live halfway close to me. You stayed over. But I haven't seen the sun but 2 days out of about 15. So this is really important. And the reason I bring this up is because for those of you that really want to be into the truth, you can't fight the good fight if you're sick. And so when, why is it we're all getting viruses at the exact same time? Jimmy, I haven't shook your hand yet, and yet you and I could end up suffering from the same virus, from the same flu. And so it used to be, well, you didn't wash your hands. Well, you touched that. Well, you were in the same room with so-and-so. That's not the case anymore.
Right.
They're dropping it on us. So with this being said, and it's sitting right here at Harvard Education, right there's Harvard University. They have a whole program. And it goes, I'm not going to bore everybody with all the details, but you might want to go to the geoengineering.environment.harvard.education and read it for yourself. What does it have to do with health? It means that it's going to break down your immune system. And that is what makes you sick. That's what makes you go to urgent care. That's what makes you go to the hospital. And that's what makes you have an early death. So with this being said, and the food, obviously, with Monsanto, and I thought it was interesting, Jimmy. I got this in the mail today. I've never even heard of them, but I'm going to have to research them. But there was a whole thing. It's called Natural Resources Defense Council, and it's all on Bush, or not Bush, excuse me. It's all on Trump and the Environmental Protection Agency, and how they're basically selling us out to Monsanto and Bayer. And so I got to do the research, because I knew about it and how they're killing our bees and blah, blah, blah. I got this the same day as I'm looking up this geoengineering stuff. And it kind of makes me nervous, because if those bees die, they are dying. That's a fact. Without this information, it's still a fact.
Right.
If they die, the last bee, when it dies, we have 5 years as a world population and we're dead.
Yeah, we're over.
This is huge news. So, and it's been there, but it needs to be brought out more, because we need to be, let's put it this way. One of the big factories, I think it's Tyson, basically said, hey, we're not going to put antibiotics in our chicken anymore. And I thought, wow, this is really good. We're a long way from free-range chickens, but at least it's something.
Right.
So how did that happen? That happened because people stood up and said, we're not going to buy your crap anymore.
That's exactly right.
We're not going to buy your crap. Maybe we can't get in the streets and put our pickets up. That doesn't work anyway. But we're not going to buy your crap. And then when you start putting, and really we need to stand up and say, okay, that's good. We like that. But we're still not going to rush to all your restaurants and buy your crap. You need to get free-range chicken in there that it's organic. Then we're going to rush and we're going to buy your food. So long and the short of it is, we're being bombarded with chemicals and more chemicals. And this is why we're not living to the age we're supposed to live to. All this saying is, our food does not have the stuff that it used to have 50 years ago, and that's why you use supplements. So I would just tell your listeners, and your listeners are wise. If they're listening to you, they've got it going on. And this is not just to do sales. This is just saying that whether you buy from me or anywhere, buy the supplements and make sure you supplement, because if you don't, your immune system's going to be crap. And if that immune system goes fully down, you're done like a dinner. You're going to be in urgent care. You're going to be in the hospital. And this is not a fear tactic. It's just it's really a warrior tactic. It's like, if you're going to go get in a boxing ring with a good fighter, it's probably a good idea to be trained. So the point being is, if you're going to jump in and be in the poison world, it's probably a good idea to be healthy, which is taking care of your health. It should be a lot more important than buying a new shirt.
It should be. And I cannot speak enough for, your products and your company, because over the last year where we have gone, because before that, Rita and I, look, it's the truth. Rita and I love to cook. We love to eat. We love to celebrate and hang out with our friends and family. That's what we do. But what we didn't do, and Rita and I have been together for 20 years, almost 20 years. And through that, because we love to do all of those things, we ignored, we meant to, we used to buy supplements, and we would, but they would always just sit on the shelf. I have, over at the house, I literally have a garbage bag full of pills, right? Of supplements, a garbage bag. And that's no joke. And your stuff is the first time that I saw not only changes in Rita and changes in myself, but changes that were real, right? And it's the first time. So now I feel like you're like the most skilled drug dealer out there. The first hit is free. Yeah. The first hit is free, right? Because now I literally crave your products. I need to have them in my system. I can tell when I'm not taking them. What did I say to you earlier today? Dude, I need more. Yeah. I need more.
I need stuff. I don't have any stuff. You didn't send me stuff last month. Come on.
I need more stuff, man.
Come on, Jimmy.
It's the truth. And you did tell me, we've got 1 minute left here, Ronnie, so I'm going to make this really quick. You told me today that you've got, it's not on the website yet, but it's going to be in the next few days, oregano drops. Is that for real?
Oil of oregano, yeah. And people have been actually asking for that, and so I've got it. And it does a great bunch of stuff. We can't talk about it. We're out of time. I have one more beautiful item that is so exciting. I'm so excited about this, but I can't share it. You're going to get one of the first packages because of the Great Kahuna. And everybody else, it'll be on the website in a week.
Yes. Everybody, I know what it is. And I'll tell you what, Ronnie, we've got 15 seconds left. So let me just say this. Next week when it launches, we'll get you back on Fade to Black, because this is one of the most exciting not only things for you, but it's a game changer for this country and the world. And you're going to launch this next week. So we'll get you on next week, and we'll talk more about it when the launch happens.
Sounds good. And again, you're the Great Kahuna.
Thank you so much, everybody. Ronnie McMullen, Life Change Tea. Just go to getthetea.com. Use Jimmy either online or over the phone when you order. You're going to get yourself free shipping. Ronnie, say goodnight to everybody.
Good night, guys.
Ronnie McMullen, Life Change Tea, getthetea.com. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be right back with Annie Jacobsen. You stay right there.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black Blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hi, folks. Let's wind the clocks back 60 years. Food was different. Food provided health and nutrition, and using supplements was minimal. Unfortunately, now we have chemicals, GMOs, herbicides, and pesticides that can be quite lethal in the name of our food supply and, of course, the ever-loving dollar. Supplementing our diets can be very important to stay healthy. Cleansing from daily intruders to the body might be critical. Live strong and take charge. Log on to getthetea.com. Our herbal tea is a great way to cleanse from intruders. Our supplements is a great way to maintain and improve your health. When your health is not up to par, go to getthetea.com. No GMOs, no fillers, and organic, and very helpful in keeping you at the top of your game. Life is too short to feel, you know what I mean. Stay in the game, at the top of your game with getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Again, getthetea.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Kletsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Amblin, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Annie at Annie Jacobsen. It's up there on Twitter right now in the feed. Excited. Part of our Amazing Women Week here on Fade to Black. Kicking it off tonight is Annie Jacobsen. She is a journalist, best-selling author, 2016 Pulitzer Prize finalist, by the way. Her books, Area 51, Operation Paperclip, and The Pentagon's Brain, were New York Times bestsellers and have been collectively published in many languages. Her newest book is Phenomena, The Secret History of the United States government's investigations into extrasensory perception and psychokinesis. It was released last month on March 28th. Operation Paperclip was chosen as one of the best nonfiction books of 2014 by the Boston Globe and Apple iBooks and Publishers Weekly. The Pentagon's Brain, by the way, was a 2016 Pulitzer Prize finalist in the history category. And when I sent out the congratulatory tweet to Annie for that, it was a warm spot in my life just to have her name like that in the Pulitzer list. It's just absolutely amazing. And it was chosen also as one of the best books of the year by the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and Amazon. Each of her books is in television development with Valhalla AMC, Plan B RatPac, Warner Brothers, J.J. Abrams, and Bad Robot, and Spielberg's Amblin Blumhouse. Now, Annie graduated from St. Paul's School of Princeton University, where she wrote with Joyce, Carol Oates, and Paul Auster, studied Greek, and served, one of my favorite things about Annie, as captain of the Princeton's women's hockey ice team. All right. I'd like to welcome back to Fade to Black, hockey player Annie Jacobsen. Annie, good evening.
Thank you for having me.
And it's always good to hear your voice. And I want to kind of start here. The book is amazing, and we're going to get to that in a second. But when you hear the ice hockey team at Princeton, Do you ever tire of hearing that? Because you're an author, you're a best-selling author now, and there that is sitting out there. I think it's pretty cool.
It's funny you say that because that was not known publicly until maybe one book ago, and I was doing a radio show, or maybe it was a television show, and boom, someone threw that at me, and it took me by surprise because I thought that was a long-buried secret of my past. It's only been brought up recently. You should see a photograph of me playing hockey, though. That's what they presented me with, and I look pretty bad.
Pretty gnarly.
Say the second part of the equation, but I can't. I don't know if we're on.
Family
which airwaves
hour.
We're on here.
Right. Well, I'm going to dig up that photograph one day, okay? And do you still play? Do you ever go out? There's plenty of rinks here in Southern California.
When I moved to California in the early 90s, I'm dating myself here, I was still in hockey shape, and I played with the retired Kings. That is back in the day when the team used to be owned by Bruce McNall. Remember him?
Yep.
And so I played then. But, 2 kids later and a couple books under your belt, I think my hockey skills have fallen by the wayside, I'm sad to say.
Well, we did beat the Russians. That's all that matters.
You know what? That's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
But, I had such a good slap shot. I used to be able to get it right around your throat. And can't do that anymore, so... You lose your spark, you lose your spark.
I just got Annie Jacobsen to say slap shot on the air. There you go. Life is complete. Now, your first 3 books, you've been on with us through all of those.
And thank you for that, by the way.
No,
thank you.
It's always great having you on. But I said to you today that this may be your best book yet. And that says a lot because... 51 and Paperclip and Pentagon's Brain, these were game-changing books. But this one is pretty cool. Did you feel it as you were writing it, and where did you get the idea for it?
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for saying that, because you never know. I mean, I think part of being an author, part of being a reporter, part of being a journalist is you just have to bury yourself in this idea that you think is super interesting and try to execute it in a way, but you never know. And so thank you for saying that. I think that the idea of writing a book like this had been sort of a seedling that I considered a lot, but after I wrote The Pentagon's Brain, which really dealt with so much hard science, top level, cutting edge military technology science, which was quite frightening, by the way. I mean, by the end of that book, I wanted to delve into something that was, some might say, squishy science, and others would say is more, when you're dealing with things like consciousness, when you're dealing with fact versus fantasy, when you're dealing with science versus the supernatural, there's a lot more room for philosophical ideas. That's not to say the book is esoteric, but one can allow their mind to consider different ideas. And I wanted to do that as a reporter because you work in hard science for a long time, and it can get, the focus can get very narrow. This felt like a bigger, broader focus.
The way that the CIA and, well, let's just say Washington, D.C. in general, the military industrial complex views the supernatural or ESP or telekinesis today, I think, is still running, but in a clandestine form because it's economically very smart. Right? You're not sending people around the world. You can maybe do this from an office somewhere. But their interest in it is genuine and real. Is the Soviet Union also running parallel with us? We're going to get more in depth about this later. But do you think that they are still running their programs as we are here in the United States?
Ah, you made a Freudian slip there.
Yes.
Do you mean, is Russia still running, Is Russia still running their program?
Yes.
Right. I mean, but you said is the Soviet Union, which is actually sometimes a gaffe that I make, because many of my sources would tell you that Russia is the Soviet Union.
Mandela effect. That's the Mandela effect. It just came into play right there. That was well done.
Yes, absolutely.
Well done.
And I think that's kind of like small picture, big picture of what we're talking about here.
Yes.
What's the nature of the beast? But look, let me circle back to DARPA for a minute. In the last book, The Pentagon's Brain, I was asked that question. Absolutely, Russia and China have a DARPA. And absolutely, Russia and China have a phenomena program.
I wanted to start with the end before we move backwards. And the reason for asking that is today I'm not so sure with the way that black projects are run. We don't want to admit that we have a program running. Neither would Russia, neither would China, because this is the real arms race today, isn't it?
I would say it's one of the real arms races, because there are multiple parallel programs. But interestingly, what I found, I went into this thinking that I would only find hints and slivers of acknowledgement of a program, a phenomena program, if you will, an ESP program. And I was astonished, literally, when I discovered that at least one Defense Department agency, the Office of Naval Research, admits to having a program today going on, a multi-million-dollar program. And of course, they don't call it extrasensory perception or remote viewing or psychokinesis. They call it anomalous mental phenomena, anomalous cognition. So the rubric has changed to, encompass this very high technology 21st century nomenclature, so that it disguises any suggestion that this is anything having to do with what critics would call the paranormal. But this is a real program, and the one that the Office of Naval Research has in particular that I found particularly interesting and I wrote about, they describe as the spidey sense. I mean, talk about bringing it full circle to, 21st century. And in it, they explore premonition and intuition in sailors and Marines.
So let's go backwards now that we've established that, because that's the end, that's the end game, which is today, the now. Let's back up a little bit. And the research that you have done with Operation Paperclip, Area 51, and the connections to the Nazi war machine and what went on before World War II as well. As you started to write this book, did you expect to have these same connections there? You can almost replace Operation Paperclip with supernatural nouns and verbs. And you know what I mean? It's like the same program, but the one that we know about is Paperclip. What we don't know about is the supernatural side that was going on in 1938, 39, and 40.
You are correct. And I think part of the reason why we don't know about this, and we didn't know about it, and I do bring some new facts to bear in the book, Phenomena, part of the reason we don't know about it is because of the stigma attached with anything about the occult. So in other words, the U.S. military, industrial, defense contracting world is perfectly happy to boast about, like, let's look at this, for example, the ICBM, which is the mothership of the arsenal, let's say, and began with the V2. So therefore, it's very out in the open to say, well, yes, these Nazi rocket scientists were part and parcel to our, military strength today. But you do not hear any kind of boasting about the ESP programs, and that's because there's such a taboo affiliated with things like extrasensory perception, psychokinesis, and also what I write about a lot in Phenomena, which I have not seen written about at length before in this kind of context, is another of the phenomena called map dowsing. which was a very big part of the Nazi program and was also discovered in this cache of documents, of Nazi documents that I write about in the book that were found by our military intelligence unit at the end of the war. And the cache of documents was called Das Ahnenerbe, which was Heinrich Himmler's science organization. And within that, there was a specific organization that dealt with the paranormal, and it has a very long German name, which I will not try and pronounce.
Yeah, I read it a few times, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it either. The map. Oh, okay. The map dowsing part, which if you look at Uri Geller's house today, that house was built on map dowsing, right? Mm-hmm. If you know what I mean.
And you could say, if you look at one of Uri Geller's multiple houses, those houses were built on map dowsing.
They seriously were. I mean, the petroleum industry and Uri. Okay, well, anyway, let's not go quite that sideways just yet. But dowsing itself, with the research that you have done to publish this book, do you think that it's real? I've interviewed many people about it, but what's your take on it, really quick?
Okay, so for those listening that aren't familiar with map dowsing, very quickly, it's the idea of, for map dowsing, is swinging a pendulum over a map to try and determine a specific point on the map where something is located. If you take away map and you just consider dowsing, that would be trying to locate something hidden underground by means of a dowsing stick, which, by the way, is believed, and you're talking way back in, prehistory, that is believed to be the origin of the magic wand, the map dowsing stick. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so map dowsing historically was used to locate whether it's minerals or water or treasure underground. And it has a long history in kind of mythology, etc. Now, the big question is this, does it have real results, or is it, fantasy? Is it the placebo effect? Is it the Tinkerbell effect, etc.? Well, certainly scientists and the Geological Association of America will tell you this is pure fantasy. It's nonsense. It's bunk. I mean, they have a number of names for it, none of which are flattering. On the other side of the argument, you have many, call them anecdotal if you like, experiences, events, where map dowsing produces real results. And so this gets us to the heart and soul of the book Phenomena, which is that battle between, two sides. On the one hand, the scientific skeptics who cry foul with any of this, and on the other side, those who are in the work who say, okay, fine, the phenomena don't follow the scientific method,
right, in
as much as that they are not repeatable.
Right.
But we are in the hypothesis stage. And the CIA will fall on that side as well and say, and I quote declassified documents throughout the book to support this, where the CIA is just as baffled as any of those who are in the work, saying there is inescapable evidence that the phenomena is real, albeit intermittent. So when you ask me, what do I think, I'm going to defer back to the contents of the book, which is, it's the whole story I tell in the 450 pages, which is, here's what one side says, here's what the other side says, here's what happened. And then the reader gets to decide what they think, because I really think the position of the author is less important than the details of the stories being narrated, with an understanding that things like perspective, POV, psychological, way in, all of that comes into play whenever you're talking about these mysterious and age-old, mythological concepts.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if we just stop and think for a second, certainly here in the United States, when the homesteading was going down, how many homesteads were placed where they were because of dowsing. How many? Like
many.
Many. What, 90%?
You're absolutely right. And one of my first experiences ever when I had to say what's mapped out, or what's dowsing rather, was when I was writing the Area 51 book, and I was interviewing an old-timer who worked there, who was explaining when the CIA was building the base, one of the biggest problems was they couldn't find water.
Right.
And they tried everything, and they certainly had no shortage of engineers out there at the Nevada test site.
Right.
I mean, that was, you had the world's top engineers designing nuclear weapons, and none of them could find water. They bring in an old dowser, this sort of wizened old man with a rancher hat and a forked stick. And lo and behold, he takes his stick out, roams around the Area 51 area and says, this is where the water is. They drill, and what do they find? The water, and that's the well. And that story was, verified from multiple sources. Yep, that's how we found the water. And so then you have to say, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, so as an author, I mean, for you, when you came into this, I mean, what was your take on dowsing, and did it change? I guess that's the question. Did your position change on it when you finished the book?
This is how my position shifted, okay? So let's use the great reference point, which was created by Gertrude Schmeidler, who was the experimental psychologist from Harvard, who in the 50s became very interested in this subject matter, but her way in was how and why people believe or don't believe. How do they perceive? How can people have completely different perceptions of the same event? Okay, and that led her into ESP, and then she became a real pioneer in this area. But she created a system for dealing with all this called the sheep and the goats, and she determined that people who, or rather she called people who were absolutely convinced that it was an impossibility that any of this existed. They were scientific skeptics. They were the goats. And on the other side of the spectrum were the sheep, those who were open to the idea that ESP and other kinds of phenomena were possible. And I think it's interesting to point out that the key word is open to it. They were not convinced that it's possible. They were simply open to it. Sheep and goats. Now, if you hold that thought for a minute and consider that was her, framework in the 1950s.
Right.
And then you consider the most recent Gallup poll that exists on this subject matter. Do people believe in this kind of thing? It's fascinating to me that the majority of Americans are sheep, okay? 76% of Americans are, define themselves as sheep. And 24% were goats, were scientific skeptics. But very interesting, you find the loudest voice from the skeptics. And so people often think it's, 50-50, or perhaps even that there are more skeptics than believers, if you will, when in fact, the opposite is true. But I think that goes back to the stigma of thinking about this kind of thing. So to answer your question, if I considered myself neutral in the beginning and approached the subject diligently attempting to look at both sides of the argument, I came out of it all skewering toward a sheep.
Right.
Skewering toward being open to this. And I think also what I found interesting is that, I found the scientists in the work. And remember, weeding out the charlatans and the fraudsters and the snake oil salesmen, I found the scientists who were working in this and dedicated to this kind of work and had been in this kind of work for decades to be extraordinarily interesting people. And I found, for the most part, with some exceptions. But on the other hand, of all the skeptics that I interviewed, I found them to be much more curmudgeonly than I expected, much more closed-minded, you might say. And most specifically, I found them to be really sarcastic and kind of questioning, certainly my intellectual, or kind of suggesting that I was somehow intellectually inferior by even wanting to write about this subject matter. And being stubborn as I am, that made me want to write about it all the more.
Yeah, that's the one thing when it comes to skeptics. If there's one thing that gets under my skin, it's just that once you are, well, okay, sheep is a weird thing for us to say on this show because of Bill Cooper. That's another story. But when you throw in the goat side, okay, we're talking about sheep and goat, that the skeptics immediately take the position of superiority in brain power, right?
Absolutely, it's crazy. It's very polarizing, and it's almost. I mean, I would say, you know what? I'm going to say this: 100% of the skeptics I interviewed were that polarizing. I mean, no one said like, "Oh yeah, it's an interesting subject," but I certainly don't even believe it. You know, they didn't. That's not the position. The position is very sarcastic and they kind of go on the attack, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, especially when their answer is no, right? They don't back it up with anything. It's like, no, it can't be. No. Well, what do you mean? Now, they will throw it back at us and say, well, what about the evidence that you have? And we can say, well, there's A, B, C, D, and D. We have this research, we have this. What do you, well, I don't need it. I only need to say no. And that's the thing, you know, it infuriates me, Annie. It just infuriates me.
Well, I think it's also a lot more fun to have an open mind. I mean, I really mean that genuinely.
Totally.
You know, I think it allows you more freedom in your own process of, like, if you're for me as a reporter, I mean, you know, they always say there's two kinds of authors. There's people who write about what they've spent their life proving, and there's people who write about what they don't yet know. And I fall into that second category. I mean, I enter into a subject, essentially a newcomer. And, you know, with the exception of having an awareness of the historical framework about how war, weapons, U.S. national security, and secret keeping works because of my position as a national security reporter. So I have the architecture there. But whatever subject matter I'm entering into, whether it's Area 51, the Nazis, DARPA, or ESP, I don't come with a preconceived idea, because I don't come with a set of, you know, with a wide berth of knowledge in those areas. But whenever you're talking about a scientific skeptic, they have, you know, who is specifically against this kind of consideration, they have an arsenal of information at their disposal, and there's kind of no room for any discussion otherwise.
Yeah,
that was my experience.
And you bring this up in the book too, and we'll talk about this. We need to take a break right here, but you bring this up in the book. I think it was Puharich that said it, but that real scientists still do research, right? It's one of the great.
Yeah.
It's one of the great points. Not only from him, but the way that you wrote it in the book, too, as well. Our guest tonight, Annie Jacobsen. Now, when we come back, we're going to start with the origins over in Germany, which is pretty strange, and then what happened after World War II, leading up through Puharich, and we'll get to today. Our guest tonight, Annie Jacobsen, the book, Phenomenon. This is Fade to Black. I'll be right back.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies.
I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. I went from being able to work 14, 16 hours a day with no problem to where I could barely walk a block to the store. I went on to the phytonutrients about 6 months ago, and within a couple of months, my medical doctor had cut my prescriptions down in a little bit smaller dosage. The next time I went back a month later, I walked into the doctor's office and he says, "My gosh, what's happened to you? You don't even look like the same person." He looked at my legs and the swelling had gone down. My blood pressure was down. The venous stasis ulcers that I had had on my legs for the last 4 or 5 years because of the poor circulation were all healed, and I'm feeling far better.
The new challenge will allow you to receive 2 months of Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies free. And we'll even ship them to you free. Call now for details. Call 1-800-246-8751. Or go online to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code TALK.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Annie Jacobsen, her new book, Phenomenon. And what I want to do right now, Annie, is I want to start with the origins of everything. The Himmler and Hess, maybe not so much Hitler. The historical record on this is a bit is still in question, I should say. But certainly those two were fully engaged in the supernatural and different organizations over there. They had programs in place and were dictating Nazi policy based on the supernatural. And it caused Rudolph to jump on a plane one day and fly to England and parachute out. It's a great story. Tell us how that happened.
I mean, it's remarkable that Hess, here he is the deputy Führer to Adolf Hitler. He's number 2 in command. And he's got his own personal astrologer. And he, on the advice of that astrologer, this is part of the historical record, gets in his plane and defects to, flies to Scotland to allegedly try and, negotiate some kind of peace treaty there. That part of it is hazy, but the fact that he went on the advice of astrologer is something that he told Speer later in prison, that he was working essentially on the advice of the supernatural. This is just a remarkable kind of, it's not even a footnote to history. It's just it's a placeholder. It's astonishing. And even more interesting I found was that Hitler confided to Speer that he was enraged by what he knew was some of his highest ranking generals or lieutenants, deputy Führers, were engaged in the occult. And he was, in a great quote, he says, I thought we'd left all this mysticism behind.
Right.
My God, we should have stayed with the church. And But when Hess defected, it gave Hitler the power he needed to clamp down on the supernatural, and he ordered a special action Hess, it was called. And all of Germany's astrologers and supernaturalists were all rounded up and sent to concentration camps. Hitler, again, would loathe the supernatural. Himmler was married to this ideology and even continued his work in this world after Special Action Hess came down.
And the way, this is the thing, especially with fake news today and what we know about Project Mockingbird and the CIA and propaganda and that we live with today. You spent many, many pages in the book laying out some of the most incredible, for me, the pop culture word today is fake news, right? Mm-hmm. But the governments of Great Britain and the United States got a grip on the supernatural element that was going down in Germany and started propaganda with the supernatural. And not only here in the United States announcing things, but in Great Britain, but we're also printing magazines in Germany with fake astro charts, and this it's an amazing story. How did you put all of that together? You know what? Maybe you should even tell the story a little bit better, because I have never heard this before.
It was remarkable, and what's interesting is I'm glad you picked up on this and enjoyed this part of the book as much as I enjoyed researching and reporting it, because I was following a thread that you often hear about the parapsychology programs, the phenomena programs, the remote viewing programs of the 70s and the 80s in the U.S.
Right.
You often hear, these were just propaganda programs. We weren't really doing it. We just wanted the Soviets to think they were. Well, that I found to be false. We were actually doing this, and we were not doing it from what I could most definitely determine from thousands of pages of declassified CIA and Defense Department documents. This was not a propaganda campaign in the 70s and 80s and 90s. This was real research for intelligence collection and for operational use. But backing up to the early 40s, before America even got involved in the war, I was astonished to find this program that you are talking about, where the British keyed in on the Nazis' obsession with the occult,
right,
and decided to launch a propaganda campaign in America. And this was remarkable, where it's very timely when you think about what's going on today, with a foreign power able to wreak havoc. And, wreak havoc, when I say that, what I mean is had a real political goal in mind that was to get America into the war. So backing up, we're in 1941, and America are still isolationists at this point. We do not want to enter the war. And the British want the American military machine. They want our help. And so they send this fellow, interestingly, a committed astrologer named Louis de Wohl, but who was also a dedicated Brit. And they send him to America to write a column called Stars Foretell. Okay? And what they start to do is they start to feed him propaganda, meaning they are feeding him de Wohl information, which is accurate about the Nazis. But de Wohl is publishing it in his column as if it's a prediction.
Yeah, like he's not Nostradamus or something.
Yes, and they start to call him, the Nostradamus of the modern age.
Right.
But there are real consequences, which is the FCC in America recognizes how popular de Wohl is, that, millions of Americans are reading his column because, oh my goodness, he says Hitler's going to do this, and 3 days later, Hitler does that. Well, that's because there was no real-time news in 1941. And the British were able to give him the information, and then the U.S. press would catch up on the information 3 days later.
How brilliant. How brilliant, right?
Right? Right?
And
he becomes so popular that the FCC lifts his ban on letting a astrologer, give a news report. And then we find out later, meaning now, from these documents I got from the British archives that Duvall, and this has been reported recently as well by others, that Duvall was in fact an agent of MI5. And what he was doing was, with the knowledge of William Donovan, who was just at that time setting up the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA, and with the knowledge of the President of the United States, unearthing these ideas that America might need to enter the war to help beat the Nazis. And that's exactly, how it rolled out, not because of Duvall, but because, Pearl Harbor. So fate and circumstance intervene in a different way. But Duvall was definitely an incredible example to me of how you can really use people's deep convictions about things for propaganda purposes.
Yeah, and there's one other story that you have in the book. It blew my mind, where Duvall says, I'm paraphrasing here, you're the author, but Duvall says in his column, there's a high-ranking Nazi is going to go crazy in 3 days. Right? He's going to lose his mind. And 3 days later, boom, it happens, and, found crazy. And then but as it turns out, the entire story was fake. Right?
Exactly. 3 days later, the U.S. reports, my God, a Vichy dictator in the Bahamas has gone crazy and needed to be restrained by his staff. And you find out later that never even happened.
It never
happened. The British planted that story in the U.S. press because, as I write in the book, what was the U.S. press going to do? How do you fact-check something with the Third Reich?
Right. You can't. You can't. And here we are dealing with fake news today, right? This has been an art that has been perfected for quite a long time. This is not a 2016 phenomenon.
It's a wonderful reminder of that, isn't it? Where you realize, this is tradecraft going back decades.
It's an amazing. I read that. I was like, man. And we're so in shock today when it comes to fake news, Annie. Right? Everybody's just like, I can't believe they're doing this to us, man. We can't trust the mainstream. We can't even trust the fake, and we can't trust anything. You know what? It's been going on for a long, long time. You really need to read your news with your eyes squinted. Right.
Yes, but it does make you wonder, because in this very specific instance, we now know, because I'm quoting from declassified British documents, Duvall's handler, a very famous British spy named Sir William Stevenson. I'm quoting him, talking to his folks back in Britain, saying, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the Americans are going for it. We're really riling them up and getting them, wanting to join the war effort. That's not exactly what he said, but that's the subtext. So, but it takes decades to learn that, and at the time you think, whose motivation should we look at here? And it's an interesting parable for what you just said about, yes, you must read news with eyes squinted, and perhaps we can't really know what the motivation is for whoever's the puppet master of some of these massive propaganda campaigns until it's already too late.
So World War II ends. We go in. Obviously, PAPERCLIP starts to kick off. We're looking for aerospace technology, airplane technology, the rockets, the scientists, the hardware, all of the notes and the programs, and of course the scientists themselves. And then we start to uncover this supernatural side of Germany, and the race was on to grab these guys and gals too as well.
And the CIA was working from a very interesting premise here. If we cut to that chase for a second. Okay?
Sure.
The CIA was we're talking early 1950s. And yes, we are talking about sub-projects within MK Ultra, which gets so many people's hackles raised up because it has such a conspiratorial overtone to it. I mean, you say MK Ultra, and many people roll their eyes and think, conspiracy. But in fact, as I report in all of my books, there are very serious threads to the truth about this program, one of which deals with the occult. But the CIA, in this MK Ultra sub-Project 58, the premise that they were working from, which I found fascinating, was that, okay, let's just accept that ESP exists. Let's accept, and when I say extrasensory perception, let's take a moment to define that, okay? It means getting information from a means other than the 5 known senses. So knowing the unknowable, getting information from somewhere else that can relate to intelligence collection. That's what the CIA was after. And they began working from the premise, an old Aztec legend, that if you give the shaman, so the person who has extrasensory perception or extrasensory powers as the local shaman, that kind of archetype of a person does, then you would enhance their powers. That's the Aztec legend. And specifically what you must have is a field mushroom called Teonocnau, or God's flesh. And it grows in Mexico. So that's the myth that I really could find that was the origin story for the CIA's entree, like active groundwork into the phenomena programs of the 50s. And I found that remarkable because they really went on a trip, no pun intended, to try and find these mushrooms.
And here we have also, okay, now we're going to take a step to the right or step to the left and get off of the military side of things and talk about Puharich, because, and for me, and it's been discussed many times on this show, when we are talking about the richest, most influential industrialist families in the United States, if not the world, and nothing like the Northeast, right, of the United States. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about the DuPonts and the Astors, the Youngs, the family, the most powerful of the powerful were also free thinkers and got involved with Puharich, who was, he's a doctor, wanting to get more and more into science, and the science of, because he had an experience when he was a kid, of ESP and communication and the nervous system, and they start to fund Puharich with his institute, which eventually moved into the communication with the 9. And that's where the CIA turns around and recognizes what Puharich is doing. But this actually happened. This was a turning point, and we're not... How do I want to say this, Annie? I want to say this correctly. We look at some of the industrialists and their families as being educated and not interested in something like this. But they truly are. And they look to Puharich to put this all together for them. Tell us about that story.
Well, you're right. And I had sort of a reporter's lucky break in this arena because I was able to locate documents in the Library of Congress that tell this story. Documents that I don't believe had been read since the 1950s. I mean, you can kind of, when you get enough experience as a reporter of looking in documents in the National Archives, you can kind of tell how old a piece of paper is and how often it's been handled based on the way in which it sits in the folder and the way in which it's like paper-clipped or staples. I mean, if you're talking about a staple that's rusted and has not been removed in 50, 60 years, it's a very interesting moment. And that's what I had. In the papers of Marcella DuPont, she kept all of her letters about this very esoteric foundation started by Andrea Puharich, as you so interestingly introduced him, who was this medical doctor, this young medical doctor, interested in pursuing these very esoteric, nonconformist ideas about extrasensory perception. And he caught the attention of the sort of erudite elites who were professors and doctors at Harvard and Princeton and Yale were in 1946, 47, right after the war. And through his series of lectures at these great universities, he gets the attention of the Astors, the DuPonts, the Forbes, the Bordens, who say, come with us, and we'll set you up on this foundation. I mean, it's straight out of some kind of a storybook, except for it's nonfiction.
Right.
And they set Puharich up in this grand seaside mansion in Maine. You know, the thing has 45 rooms and, 7 fireplaces and 12 baths and turrets and 65 acres. And now they're gathering around the fireplace at night discussing these occult ideas, discussing these ideas of the supernatural, but also discussing science and medicine. And here you have this super interesting merging of the, as you said, the super wealthy, the rich, the well-respected, and the confident, the sort of leading industrialists of America, deciding to explore this arena that really, I think, sets off the whole book of phenomena, which is this science or is this the supernatural? And what the Round Table Foundation comes to in conclusion is that it's supernatural. But you have the parallel story going on that you brought up, which is that right around this same time, the CIA and particularly the Pentagon becomes interested in Puharich's work because they're tracking all of the individuals in America who are working in ESP. And they court him and get him to come back into the military service. He had done military service during the war. And he leaves this enclave where he's got, full, freedom to explore these ideas in this incredibly intellectual, fabulously wealthy way, right? And suddenly he's back in the world of military bureaucracy at the Army Chemical Center. And that's where he begins the work on the MK Ultra Subproject 58 program. And, it just launches from there. It gets so dramatic. And Puharich is this fascinating character because he becomes kind of a cautionary tale. I mean, he pursues his research to the gates of hell.
And there was something else. I'm sure you caught this. You didn't bring it up in the book, but I caught it. I want your comment. Don't you think that he must have tripped out just a little bit? That it was the Bordens that were at the Harvard lecture, and that's who he struggled with in Chicago with his first job, right? The Borden.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he was a poor son of an immigrant. I mean, his father was a stowaway. And, his youth it's so poignant to read about because he was such a brilliant, determined, ambitious young man. And when he was a poor kid, he was a milk delivery boy. He was delivering Borden milk, right? You can kind of imagine these tin cans, tin bottles of milk that he's lugging around the slums of Chicago. And it is there in one of these slums that he's confronted by, what he describes as kind of sounds like a rabid dog that's about to tear him to shreds. And according to his, notes and his recollections, he subdued the animal with his mind. Okay, that's how he tells the story. I mean, it's like a little boy fairy tale, right?
Right.
But it stays with him. And I think you're absolutely right that later in his life, when he's courted by one of the Bordens, this extraordinarily wealthy woman who is fascinated with his ideas and says, "Let me pay for your research." There's this interesting kind of moment where you can't help but wonder, is he making a connection that is there, or is he making a connection that wasn't there?
He had to have tripped. If I was in that position, you would have done the same thing. I would have said to Joyce Borden, I used to work for you guys. It's kind of trippy that you're here at Harvard. This was meant to be. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that, because he was fostering these ideas of the supernatural and that there's a higher force at work.
Bingo.
He was able to see that, I think, is what the read is. We don't know, because in his notes, although I looked at so many of his handwritten notes, that's what's implicit. That's what's suggested, and that's very interesting to me from a character standpoint, right?
It reinforces what he's been suspecting.
Yes, it becomes his my side bias. Right. Like this is all destined. This is all predetermined.
100% my side bias. That's exactly it. And then, so he couldn't ignore it, and it must have sent him the signals at that point, especially so early on, that, you know what, there's something to this. I'm on the right path. These people were sent here to help me, and there's a reason for this. It's a sign.
Exactly. And then he began looking for everything, signs and symbols and everything, to, support his theories. And then when the merging of this story with the CIA on the hunt for this field mushroom, that's a hallucinogenic mushroom.
Right.
And, you have to remind yourself here, this is 1953, and the hallucinogenic mushroom that we all know of now, this did not exist. This was not known. I mean, it certainly existed out in nature, but it was not known to the scientific community in America. And here is Andrija Puharich on a quest to find it, from civilian literature he's reading. And the CIA, with all its might and power and persuasion and money, is on that same quest, and they can't find it. And they realize that Puharich is closer to finding it than they are, and they kind of use him to get the mushroom. And it's just and he feels betrayed. I mean, it's like you can't make this up. These are these archetypes of human drive and passion and betrayal that I found so fascinating, in all rolled up in this character of Andrija Puharich.
Now, when we come back, the gentleman that what's his name, starts with a V, that channeled
Dr. Vinod.
Yes, we're going to talk about that, because that and the 9 at what went down, especially in our little circle of ufology and so forth, was a turning point in history. But here, once again, is Puharich and the 9 and all of these industrialists sit down and have this seance. And it's a pretty crazy event. And then we'll jump into the CIA and we'll do all of that next. You ready?
Yes, I am.
Annie Jacobsen. On Fade to Black, I'm your host, Jimmy Church. The new book is Phenomenon. And the magic mushroom, this is a very serious point. We know about it today. We really, honestly, didn't know about it then. It was a myth, and we had to go and find it. We'll talk about all of that when we come back. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Hey there, quick question for you. Would you be okay with more energy, more endurance, thicker, healthier hair, a better mood, reduced appearance of wrinkles, improved sleep, improved blood pressure and cholesterol profiles, improved vision, improved memory? Okay then. Well now, have you heard of Nature's Youth RSF? It's from the anti-aging experts at nature'syouth.com. Nature'syouth.com. See, at Nature's Youth, they understand exactly what it means to provide top quality health products. And Nature's Youth customers not only improve their health, they know they're also providing their body with the right nourishment to maintain that peak performance and fight the aging process. If health, wellness, and nutrition are what you desire, choose Nature's Youth RSF. I did. You see, you're going to get older. It's just up to you how you feel when you get there. Get started today. Nature's Youth RSF. Simple to use, simple to order. Go to nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com.
I was introduced to this remarkable product, Balance of Nature Fruits and Veggies, and to say it's amazing is an understatement. Balance of Nature provides the nutrients of 9 to 11 servings of 31 different whole ripened fruits and veggies per day, and the cost to the consumer for 9 to 11 servings is about 22 cents per serving, as opposed to over $1 in the store. Balance of Nature Fruits and Veggies helps boost the immune system by over 720%, and they also provide a health coach for you at no charge to guide you with any questions you may have. And you can also visit their website for testimonials on balanceofnature.com. So take steps to give yourself better overall health and call them now, toll free, at 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com right now. Make sure to let them know you heard it here by using promo code TALK for a special discount. That's balanceofnature.com and use promo code TALK.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Annie Jacobsen. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking about her new book, Phenomenon. It is an amazing read. Just go to AnnieJacobsen.com. Go and get the book. Highly recommended. Annie, before we get to that and the magic mushroom drawings that happened, which were pretty fascinating too as well, there was one story that stuck out in the entire book that absolutely blew my mind. And it's the story, the case where Puharich wanted to find somebody that was hearing voices in their head. He finds a machinist at Bellevue Hospital that was there because he was hearing voices in his head. Now, before we get to that, do you remember the episode of Gilligan's Island when Gilligan was hearing radio stations through his teeth?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a famous episode of Gilligan's Island, and so he would get news reports right through his teeth, right? But this actually happened. That's the crazy. I read this and I just could not believe it. Tell us what happened. They find this machinist at Bellevue.
I love this. Yes, I love this because it speaks to the idea that Puharich was not all like esoteric, supernatural, concepts. I mean, he was really grounded, at least originally, in scientific research and groundbreaking ideas about perception and point of view and hearing things. So what he wondered if humans certain people could hear things on different frequencies. He was following this idea to try and prove some of his theories about how ESP might work. And he reached out to a very famous friend and colleague named Warren McCullough, who's also, has lots of conspiracies around him for many reasons, because he was a very powerful establishment scientist and a CIA asset. And he asked, and McCullough worked at Bellevue, and he said, can you find us a patient who is hearing voices, but who does not have a history of mental illness, okay? So they wanted kind of like a one-time weirdo, let's say, right? A one-time psycho. And they wanted to see, and they took him in, and they began to interview him, and they found out that he was a machinist, and he was hearing these voices, and their theory was that somehow the carborinium dust that was in his mouth was acting like a crystal rectifier from the old crystal radio sets of the 1920s. Okay, and this was, I mean, it's such a far out theory, but they took the man into their custody. They looked at him, they interviewed him, they cleaned his teeth. This is the short version of it, and he was suddenly cured of his psychiatric problem. So they determined that he was never crazy to begin with. He wasn't hearing voices. He had tuned in to a New York City radio station.
WOR, one of the most famous radio stations on planet Earth. And it just happened his teeth were tuned to the radio station. So he really
and again,
was.
Readers have every reason to say, well, that's an apocryphal story. I'm talking about declassified documents from McCullough. That is from the American Physical Society. When the CIA later was working on Puharich, looking into him, and they wanted to know about his background, and McCullough, represented this story to be absolutely true and was astonished by it. Like, his point was, look, this guy may have some wild and aberrant ideas, but he's also a really, cutting-edge pioneer in terms of medical research.
Could you imagine hearing voices in your head, and you don't know if you want to admit to it, but you finally do, and you're told that you're crazy when in reality you really were hearing voices in your head?
I mean, right? That's the kind of thing, again, that I write stories like that, I weave them into the narrative, and I certainly weave them throughout phenomena. Perhaps thinking, well, the scientific skeptics are going to want to talk about that and have a point to say, well, okay, so on balance, I see, but no, those stories always get cast by the wayside, and I find that troublesome because I do think it's important, for as many people that, are interested in Puharich for his supernatural ideas, that you could also be really interested in Puharich for his very grounded, funny word choice here, pioneering medical work that he did. And that is not the only story I tell in the book. I mean, he did another thing with the Atomic Energy Commission. Again, stories pulled right out of declassified Atomic Energy Commission documents where he did a similar study with deaf women that he was able to give them the ability to hear in certain situations. Astonishing.
It was that was another. Everybody, the book is full of evidence and stories like this. Absolutely incredible, and even that which ended up, it was a medical procedure that is performed today. It has helped millions and millions and millions of people around the world get their hearing back, but it was an accident, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely incredible. So back to Puharich. So the search for this magic mushroom was on. Again, it was they were chasing a myth, right? The CIA and the government. They're trying to find a truth serum that we've all, read about and over the years. But they're trying to find this. And this magic mushroom thing, it's funny because today it's like everywhere. But back then, they truly could not find it, and they kept going back to this city in Mexico trying to chase down witch doctors and shamans and trying to get to this elusive mushroom. But Puharich has this channeling session with somebody that goes back to ancient Egypt with hieroglyphs and the drawing of the mushrooms with the little round circles on the top.
I mean, the whole thing is so fantastical. If it wasn't related, if I hadn't been able to find these crazy stories and then actually reference them in declassified CIA and Defense Department documents, you would toss them out as fantasy, as made up, right? And there are certain things that are inexplainable, like how on earth that medium who happened to have been a dinner party guest of Alice Auster, one of the wealthiest women in America at the time, and he goes into this trance, and in this trance he draws out what is a magic mushroom. I mean, it's not too hard to draw, but he essentially gives a recipe for how this is supposed to be taken, ingested to give you these divinatory powers. And again, Puharich sees this as evidence that he is on the right path, that his quest is, predestined or preordained. And it just becomes this interesting weaving of fact and fantasy, which winds up with Puharich, getting hold of these magic mushrooms right around the same time as the CIA gets a hold of them. They have this dramatic parting of ways. Puharich quits military life because he just wants to be back in that gorgeous seaside mansion in Maine doing as he wants to do. And at that point, he begins to take a lot of drugs. And again, that's from his own documents, so we're not speculating here. He decides to use himself as the control. That's how he describes it. So he's got psychics up there at the mansion, and he's got all these laboratory assistants, and they're trying to see if it's true, if the myth is true, if this God's flesh mushroom will enhance the divinatory powers. But first, he takes the drugs himself to see how they work in a non-shaman type person. And you get the sense that, pardon the expression, he gets a little too high on his own supply.
Right. Do you think that, certainly through the research, that he went from, he lived almost two lives. You can almost draw a line right there where he changed. He was running with the upper crust of America in one life, and then the next life, he just turned the page, and maybe he just liked getting high. Do you?
I love the way you describe that. It really is like turning the page, and it made me wonder: did they turn the page? We can't know. I mean, Alice Astor was his primary beneficiary. Her father was John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest man in America who went down in the Titanic. And he left his daughter Alice, millions of dollars. And that was an extraordinary amount of money then. And Alice Astor was Puharich's primary benefactor. And she kind of abruptly died right in the middle of Puharich's heyday with the mushrooms and the psychics, and I got the sense that when the funds dried up, there was a real shift inside him. But I'm not so sure, as I write in the book, because I report that, and again, I had access to the documents about some of the financial documents that I found in the Library of Congress. And he begins to get money again from another mysterious source. So I think it's a great question you ask. Did he turn the page, or was the page turned on him? But either way, you can really see a pivot in his life and it really goes like this. I mean, when he started as a medical doctor in the 40s, and when he was giving those lectures at Harvard and Princeton and Yale, he was on a quest to know what this mysterious, unknown energy force inside the human body. I mean, the force of life, if you will, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What that was. And he believed initially that it was a force from within. And over the next decade, with these experiences at the Round Table Foundation, he shifted his position from that it was a force from within to this is a force from without. This is a supernatural force. And that is where he begins a new trajectory from which he would never return.
Never returned. And to be clear for the audience, Puharich's original research was based on our nervous system and the way that it operated with the brain. And he looked at nature, he looked at bees, he looked at birds, he looked at nature itself and said, they're communicating. Right? They have the ability to do this. So do we. And it goes back to his thing with the dog when he was younger. And that was his pursuit. And then it changed. It changed with the magic mushrooms and other things, plus the seances that were going on, because he was convinced now that there was a way to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence. And that also became a major part of his focus. And he became a changed man. He completely grew his hair long and just, started a 20-year involvement with the CIA and drugs and ESP and telekinesis.
I mean, he's such an interesting character, and it did begin. Your interest in the nine fascinates me because I did not know about the nine before researching this book. But the narrative I tell in Phenomena is that Puharich meets up with a Hindu scholar and mystic named Dr. Vinod, who's visiting America as a part of a lecture series for the Rotary Club. I mean, it sounds so plebeian.
Right.
But Vinod gives Puharich a reading, and he's able to see into his past, and that's called retrocognition. In other words, whereas precognition is seeing the future, instead, Vinod grabs Puharich's finger, the way Puharich describes it, and tells him all these things about his past, which Puharich said he simply could not have known. And Puharich becomes obsessed with Vinod, brings him up to Maine, and begins conducting these seances with Dr. Vinod in the presence of his bevy of, these industrialists, the Austers, the DuPonts, the Forbes, the Youngs. And what Vinod says is about this group called the Nine, and that it gives Puharich this idea, false or not, that somehow Puharich and this group must act as guardians for this secret and powerful knowledge that is about to be imparted upon them that, they must take care of. And that is fascinating to me because it's this age-old idea of, you're more important than someone else.
What's your take on Vinod now? Do you think, okay, I'm going to ask you two direct questions. Do you think that he was a charlatan, that he somehow got Puharich's bio and was able to read about his life and he was set up by Vinod? Is that a possibility?
I think it could be. I mean, I looked and looked and looked for Vinod, and sometimes when I write in characters like this into the book, it's like a launching point for another journalist to pick up that thread and see where it leads. Because, in the same way that I work on the shoulders of other journalists and find things out, I take their footnotes and run with them. What I do put forth in the book that I thought was super interesting and I hadn't read before was, as I was reporting about this idea of what's called cryptomnesia, and it's this idea that you can be told, some people, almost like you have a photographic memory. And the great irony of cryptomnesia is the most famous person ever accused of it is, of all people, Helen Keller. Okay?
Right.
That she plagiarized this story, and there was this very big public trial, and the idea is, well, she must have been read the story as a young girl. She remembered it, and then 10 years later or 8 years later was able to recount it verbatim as her own. I mean, it's hard to even wrap your head around what a complicated concept that is, right? And also knowing Helen Keller, that doesn't seem like she had a malicious bone in her body, and she was certainly not a plagiarist, but yet this is what happened to her. And so in pursuing that idea about cryptomnesia, I came across the story written in 1922 by a British novelist in an adventure magazine. His name was Talbot Munday, and he wrote this story called The Nine Unknown. And it takes place in India in 270 BC. But in essence, it read to me very much like what, and the reader can decide, but what Puharich heard, and we put that in quotes, from Dr. Vinod, was essentially, it very much read to me like he cribbed the whole story from Talbot Munday's, adventure magazine story called The Nine Unknown. Again, I ask in the book, was Puharich a charlatan? Was he a plagiarist? Did he know this? Had someone read him this story when he was a young boy, and he kind of had his Helen Keller moment where he remembered it as his own? I mean, these are fascinating ideas. Separate, if you can push away the idea that someone is a charlatan or a fraudster for a moment, and go with what many psychologists work with, this idea of like, what is the mind capable of remembering? that was the area that I found very interesting.
And with the CIA, as they started to bring Puharich back in, because now he is working actually and lecturing for the Pentagon at that point, do you think he was reluctant in that, or do you think that it was his way of still trying to move all of this forward some way?
I think the latter. I think that, and it's such an interesting kind of push me, pull me relationship, because he's consistently throughout his chronology, he's both desired, his knowledge is desired by the CIA and the Pentagon, and also rejected. And for a insecure person like Puharich, you can only imagine what that must have done to him. And I think his response was exactly what you said, where he was like delighted to be invited back in and then furious to be rejected. But he never was able to take his own position and stick with it. It's like when invited, he was the first to show up to the party.
When did the CIA, at this point in the timeline, when did the CIA go all in?
So in 1970, you have sort of things sort of the story fades in the late 60s, certainly as far as this reporter could learn. Mm-hmm. But it begins back up again in earnest in 1972 when the CIA approaches Hal Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute and lets him know that they are aware of his work. He's a physicist at Stanford, and he's a former NSA cryptologist, and he has an interest in ESP as it relates to some biomedical physiological experiments he's conducting. And the CIA finds out about it and approaches him and says, you would be a great candidate for a program we're interested in, seeing whether or not there is any legitimacy to ESP. It's this continuing theme throughout the book that, like, there's a big interest in it, and then it sort of fades away. And then a new set, maybe it's a new generation of analysts at CIA or officers at the Pentagon become supremely interested in this same concept again. And that, continues to intrigue me is this age-old quest a fool's errand? Or is it kind of like this idea of eternal return, and that the circle is moving and building toward some kind of an answer, which we may or may not get in the present day with advanced technology?
Do you think that the Soviet Union at that time was also driving this too as well? Because we didn't want them to get ahead of us, in the space race and nuclear weapons and missile count and everything else. But this side of technology, too, we didn't want to relax, right? We needed to pursue that. Do you think that was driving them at the same time?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It was a driving force, certainly why the CIA picked up their program in 1972. And in Phenomena, I tell the story of Dr. Christopher Kit Green, who was the lead neurophysiologist at CIA at the time in the early 70s. The way Kit described it to me is he said, I ran the weird desk. It was his job to keep tabs on the Soviets, to keep tabs on the Chinese, to look at what was going on in India with all of these ideas of weird things, of paranormal goings-on, and I mean in the civilian sector, and also how it linked up to the military and intelligence sectors. And Green became involved early on in the program alongside Hal Puthoff, and what I found utterly fascinating was that it was Green's job to look at the physiology of the psychics that the CIA now began to employ, initially for research purposes, but a program which very quickly went operational. And here you have Kit Green faced with the same question that Puharich was originally asking, which was, what is this mysterious energy force that may or may not be powering extrasensory perception? And Green's summation was, it's from within, meaning it's physiological, meaning we're not talking about the paranormal, we're talking about the supernormal. And the best analogy that Green gave me was when he asked me to think about Mozart. And he said, you know, so you have somebody like Annie here who cannot sing but in the shower. Very bad voice.
Right.
Musically disinclined, okay? And then you think of Mozart. And you think of the music he composed, and it just takes your breath away with that extreme talent, that powerful genius behind that. Annie's normal. Mozart is a supernormal.
Right.
And that's the theory that the CIA began to pursue, that this is something physiological. It's coming from within.
You know, I talked to Hal at length about this. Did you have an opportunity to talk with Hal as well?
Interviewed Hal Puthoff at length, and
right.
He's a major character in Phenomena.
Yeah, he is. Okay, I'm just going to say this about Hal. He's one of the craziest, coolest, most interesting people on planet Earth, bar none, right? And when there were a couple of experiments that he did up at Stanford, because he didn't even feel that he had any abilities himself, right? But he turns around and he witnesses a couple of things that go down, you know, viewing rooms and stuff off campus, off site. And he, you know, at that point, he realized that they could scientifically prove that something was going on, and it proved it to himself. And to hear Hal tell the story, I can't imagine how exciting Stanford was back then, because they were at the groundbreaking of all of this, and they had the power to do and the money and to do this research, and they were getting results.
And they had 3 amazing super psychics that I write about in the book: Ingo Swann,
yep,
Uri Geller,
yep,
and Pat Price.
Yeah, and Pat Price.
And I was able to interview Geller at length. Swann and Price are both dead. But there's an extraordinary amount of declassified documentation that I had access to be able to write about some of those experiments that you're talking about. And one of my favorite sayings I came across in how the CIA felt about all this was how the concept of the 8-martini lunch came to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that the experiences that some of these analysts who would start out as skeptics, very skeptical of the program, they would sit with one of these super psychics in a Faraday cage in the electronically shielded room and go through the experiment and witness something that they could not explain.
Right.
And have to go home and have 8 martinis to kind of recover from whatever it was that just happened.
It's a fascinating...
And I love that expression.
Yes.
It's just like the 8-martini result.
Let's take a break right here, because when we come back, we're going to start into the modern side, the modern-day aspect of Phenomenon. It's a great book. Our guest tonight, Annie Jacobsen. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. More with Annie when we return. You stay right there.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
Do you know what's in your body soap? Well, I didn't know the answer until about 5 years ago when I looked at the label of my soap and was shocked to see all the chemicals. For my entire life, I had been assaulting the largest organ of my body, my skin, and to think my children were using it too. Well, a lot has changed since then. Today, my family and I operate Stone City Farms, where we make and sell all natural goat milk soap using fresh goat milk from goats we raise on our farm. Our mission at Stone City Farm is to produce high-quality, all-natural goat milk soap for people who want a fresh, unrefined, natural product. At Stone City Farms, we offer scented and unscented soaps and a signature line of gift sets customizable to your needs. To see what our customers are saying, go to StoneCityFarm.com. Use the code NATURAL for a 20% discount. That's StoneCityFarm.com, code NATURAL for 20% off your order. You never know what could be hiding in your soap.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Would you like relief from muscle pain, headaches, and discomfort to sleep better, have more energy during the day, and just feel naturally amazing? Fibromalic can help. Its blend of malic acid and magnesium can provide pain relief and comfort for those who experience fibromyalgia. It helps your body absorb more oxygen, and it works quickly for a significant reduction in pain within 48 hours, all without a prescription. Ask for Fibromalic at health and vitamin shops or shop fibromalic.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
What an amazing show. Annie Jacobsen. This portion of the broadcast is brought to you by Life Change Tea. Just go right now by clicking on the banners over at jimmychurchradio.com. It'll take you straight to getthetea.com. Just mention Jimmy when you order either online or over the phone, and you're going to get yourself some free shipping. Do what I do. Go to the specials page. All right, Annie, this is, okay, now we're in a fresh era. Now we're, it's hard to believe it's 40 years ago, but I consider the 70s today, right? We're now in the modern age. Let's go through this cast of characters really quick. We and do it individually. Who was Pat Price?
Pat Price was a fascinating person to the CIA, and he remains a great enigma. He was there for a very brief period of time in the 70s, and he kind of showed up out of the blue. And again, it sort of featured into this mystical concept of him. He was actually Hal Puthoff, the lead scientist on the program, and Ingo Swann, the lead psychic, had taken a break from the office one day to go buy a Christmas tree, down the road from Stanford. And the Christmas tree salesman is this guy named Pat Price. And he says to them, I know you guys, and if you ever need any help, just ask. I mean, Puthoff told me it was such a cryptic, weird thing to say, and the program was secret. So what was this guy talking about? And then later they get a telephone call from him, and he offers up his services. And, I'm not going to go into details about what the services Price performed in the book because they're pretty astonishing and they come straight out of declassified CIA documents. But what I will say is that Price's information was so accurate. They tested him, had him look at underground NSA facilities 3,000 miles away, asked him what was there, and Price was able to produce alphanumeric information, meaning not descriptions of rooms, but we're talking about code names off of file folders.
Right.
And when Puthoff reported this back to his handlers at CIA, the sort of the security alarm bells went off, and Puthoff gets a visit from security with a serious concern that they have some kind of a mole in-house because they can't imagine how this information has been given to them. It's knowing the unknowable. And the fact that Pat Price, not only is not arrested, but is then hired in sort of a permanent position on the SRI program as the lead psychic speaks volumes. But then what's also speak volumes is that, a year later, Pat Price mysteriously dies of a heart attack.
Right.
And this creates all kinds of conspiracy theories from the ideas, and this is internal gossip now, if you will. Did the Soviets kill him? Did the CIA kill him? I mean, you even have the Church of Scientology involved. And, this is part of the enigma of Pat Price and the legend of Pat Price.
And we all know about Uri Geller, but he had an interesting start, and he was, it's for me, when it comes to Uri, when I was in my 20s, I was a doofus, right? Uri, in his 20s, was hanging out with Moshe Dayan, and was well on his way. He was a huge celebrity in Israel at that time.
He was. I mean, he put psychic functioning on the map, and I think it's why he causes so much anger and furor among the scientific skeptics. They have been engaged in a battle with him for decades, and I have to say, I think Geller has won. And I say that because I spent quite a bit of time with him at his home in England and also in Israel. And he is absolutely delighted to continue bending spoons for anyone on the street that asks him.
Did he bend a spoon for you?
He bent so many spoons in my presence, and yes, I watched countless videos with the magicians bending spoons with predigitation, which is what they call it. So there's no doubt that magicians can bend spoon through trickery. That's not the issue that I try to confront in phenomena. What I try and confront is Uri Geller capable of bending spoons through psychokinesis?
Right.
And I think the disconnect between the skeptics and him is that they just state simply because they can do it by magic, by a magic act, means that that is how anyone else is doing it.
Right.
But Geller, going back to the 70s, what we now know from these declassified CIA documents is that Geller was a CIA asset. And pulling these different threads together, what we also know is that Geller was recruited by Puharich, who at this point in the story, and we're mid-1970s, you would think, with his long hair and his, decades now of taking hallucinogenic mushrooms, would have completely become a persona non grata at CIA. And instead, the CIA were very interested in what he was doing and who he was working with. They just didn't want anyone else to know that they were interested in him. And again, the CIA documents show that, where they work very hard to mask his participation in anything. But he's there. He's there all the way through the 90s.
You said something interesting about Uri. You think that ultimately he has won. Why do you say that? I mean, I tend to agree with that, but why would you say that?
I think that, all right, this is just my personal perspective, but I think if you're a happy and content person, you won. And I think if you are an angry and defiant person, you have not won.
Right, defeated.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was fascinated in my interviews with Uri, discussing with him this 50-year-long battle with scientific skeptics in general, but James Randi in particular, because Randi has been, dueling with Geller for decades now. I found Geller harboring no resentment, no anger, and perfectly willing to discuss that decades-long battle with a kind of neutrality that I found interesting. And when I spoke to James Randi about Uri Geller, I found the opposite to be true.
Bitter man.
He was so angry at Geller, and of course this is the famous quote that I write in my book that astonished me. He said, Uri Geller is a charlatan and a fraud, and when I die, I want to be cremated and have my ashes blown in Uri Geller's eyes.
Wow. Let it go, bro.
That's a powerfully angry statement.
Yes. Let it go.
And in that regard, so for me, and again, this is my opinion,
right?
Uri Geller has won that battle.
Do you think that part of it, and then I want to move on to Ingo Swann, but do you think that part of it, and I find nothing wrong with this statement, but do you think part of it is because Uri was a rock star and he made money and was an entertainer? He had real talent, but he took advantage of it and was on TV a lot. Do you think that is part of it and part of the anger with somebody like Randi that just cannot deal with it because Uri just chose to profit?
I don't know, but I also thought it was very interesting that most of the military psychics that I interviewed, said with a kind of pride, I never made any money doing this. It was always for flag and country. Okay,
right,
just a statement, right?
Right.
But Geller, on the other hand, is very open about the fact that he's made an extraordinary amount of money. And, The Economist magazine reported on the millions of dollars that Geller made in the 80s and 90s dousing for petroleum companies.
Yep.
So, Geller truly capitalized on his talents. That's an interesting thing. Another detail that I learned from a recent article in the New York Times about Randi, because he was involved in what turned out to be a fraud with his boyfriend of decades who had stolen the identity of another person.
Right.
And was arrested, and I write about it in the book, in this big sort of scandal. James Randi was not able to take ownership, in my opinion, of, let's say, being less than perfect and less than impeccable.
Right.
And again, that is, that kind of speaks volumes, at least to this reporter. But the one detail I found interesting about money is that earlier in his life, James Randi had been given a MacArthur Award, which is often called the Genius Award, right? Where you're just given several $100,000 to do with what you will, just because you're a genius, and that's kind of like a metaphor for you're super cool. And as it was reported in the New York Times, Randi spent the majority of his Genius Grant suing Geller. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is fascinating. And okay. I'm just
unsuccessfully, by the way.
Right.
In other words, he burned through his money.
And this is
suing Geller and trying to settle libel suits against Geller.
And there was one other thing. Can you confirm this? That Uri, I had read. Okay, I'm just going to get straight to the point. That these petroleum companies, the major ones around the world, they were paying him millions of dollars a crack to douse. right? And he must have been successful because they kept going back to him. Right? Can you confirm that?
Yes.
Did you talk to him about this?
The way it was reported in the Financial Times, okay, was that, and I confirmed all this with Geller, but, you know, again, there's a record here. He was, take, for example, Rio Tinto Zinc, which is a huge petroleum and mining company that was working out of England. They would pay him a £1 million fee, okay? This is back in the 90s. And Geller was so successful in his work that their financial arrangement changed as per Geller. So instead of getting a $1 million fee, he decided to take a percentage of the profits based on what he discovered. And that I found particularly remarkable. He was willing to bet on himself.
Right.
And the way it was reported in the Financial Times was that he'd worked on at least 11 known dowsing projects for an income total of roughly $33.75 million.
Not a bad take.
That is remarkable.
Not a bad take. Okay, let's get to Ingo Swann because I want to jump back over to the Soviet Union really quick. Who was Ingo Swann in this?
Ingo Swann was the first super psychic used by Stanford Research Institute under a CIA contract with Hal Puthoff as the lead scientist and also Russell Targ. And Swann was an artist in New York City who had been working with Gertrude Schmeidler, who we spoke of earlier, the Harvard psychologist. And she was doing psychokinesis experiments at the time. And Swann was also moonlighting for the American Society for Psychical Research. You know, all these different parapsychology groups at the 70s who were sort of vying for pole position of whose work was more scientific. And he, you know, I love writing. I really enjoyed researching and reporting his story. He wrote a number of memoirs which are unpublished, but have this incredible detailed descriptions of his work and his experiences. And he was extremely eccentric by his own admittance, and he was very defiant in his ideas. And when he was kind of rejected by the elite parapsychologists in New York City for being too weird, he took this offer from Hal Puthoff to go out and be tested by a real, you know, physicist out there affiliated with Stanford University. And it was like the way Swann wrote it in his memoir was that he was just terrified. And at first he said no, and then he finally decided, okay, I'll find out once and for all. Either this is all in my imagination or it's real. And, you know, it was a great origin story, I thought, for the work of Puthoff and Swann together and the decades of work that they ended up doing together. You know, Hal Puthoff shared with me the speech that he gave at Ingo Swann's funeral just a few years ago. You know, and it's very moving to realize what a career these two had together, and they worked kind of hand in glove, the physicist and the psychic. It was a great story to tell.
And once the CIA and the NSA were able to find out that, you know, Pat Price and Russell, you know, this whole crew Puthoff and Ingo were able to actually read maps, documents, things that are on top of desk remotely here, then certainly the Soviets could do the same with us in CIA headquarters, the Pentagon. That must have been a true fear at that point.
I mean, that absolutely is. And again, looking at the declassified documents was fascinating. I also interviewed a man named Dale Graff, who's really the progenitor of the Defense Department programs. And he was the analyst first assigned to write what is a now famous declassified report detailing the Soviet threat. There had been actually one written earlier that was very alarmist. I mean, it certainly reads alarmist now, meaning when the Pentagon was able to access or get sort of a window into the Soviet program, they were really seriously concerned that the Soviets were ahead. And that is what had prompted the whole CIA program. And then when Graf gets involved, he starts to look at the broader research that's going on in the Soviet bloc countries. And that's when they really realize, whoa, this is an even bigger program than we first thought. And then that's where you see, starting right around 1979, the expansion of the program. CIA gives up its lead program. It's in all kinds of problems with the church investigations, and DOD takes over. And there's a big portion of the book that deals with what actually happens when the military gets involved. They are a very different animal than the CIA.
Now, you're referring to Senator Frank Church of Idaho and the Church Committee and the investigations into MKUltra.
Yes. And other things, but when that all sort of went down right around 1975 is when the CIA, dropped what they called the Paranormal Perception Research Program. But that was what they called it behind the scenes in these declassified documents, but it's known as the Remote Viewing Program, sort of for nomenclature reasons. But that program officially ended, and CIA then became a client, whereas before, CIA was in charge of research and operations. It shifted over to the Defense Department, and now DOD is in charge of it, and CIA becomes a client, along with the military services, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Council, the Secret Service. The program was huge and sprawling and went on at the Defense Department for 25 years. Now,
here's the $1 million question. I think the program is still going on. Do you? And it would be some type of black project with a new name, right?
Well, the programs, let's say, are absolutely going on today. I think the question is, were they continuous or did they end? And I asked that question both about the 60s that we talked about earlier. There's a period of time where things kind of go dark, and that's what I'm super interested in. I don't have the answer.
Right.
Where a program ends, goes dark, and then the lights get turned back on, metaphorically.
Right.
So was it really dark or was it black? And when the lights get turned back on, are we just seeing the front of the program, or are we seeing the extent of the program? Now, based on the fact that I've written now 4 books that deal with war, weapons, U.S. national security, and secrets, and I'm always demonstrating back, decades ago, this is what you saw on the surface, but here's what was really going on, we now know from declassified documents. Mm-hmm. If you use that same logic, then you would have to deduce that what we see, the few projects I was able to report on at the Office of Naval Research, at the Bremerton Hospital in Washington, these programs are but the tip of the iceberg. That would be my hypothesis.
Does the CIA take your phone calls?
You can't call the CIA. I can't call the CIA. You can FOIA the CIA, and that's another very, very interesting story, because the CIA does respond to my Freedom of Information Act requests. And that in and of itself is super interesting for this reporter, because it always makes me wonder. I file so many FOIA requests, and every time I get one back that is larger than a single page letter saying non-responsive, which means, sorry, we couldn't find what you're looking for. Right. Every time I get back a big stack of documents, my first thought is always, this is fantastic. And my second thought is like, wait a minute, why am I getting these documents? In other words, is this what they will allow to be reported, or is this what is reportable?
What do you think their response would be if you got their PR department on the phone and started to ask them about remote viewing or these types of paranormal programs? Do you think they would respond?
Well, you could never get in my experience, one could never get their PR department on the phone. The closest I ever came to an acknowledgement by CIA was a very interesting one. They wrote a review of Operation Paperclip.
Oh, shut up. I didn't know that.
Yes, the CIA has a website which you can go to, the CIA library, and there's an extraordinary wealth of interesting information published under the rubric of something called Studies in Intelligence. And these are really interesting monographs that are written over the years, and CIA declassifies them and releases them to the public, and this is where you can find them. Okay.
Right.
They also have a section there where they review, their current CIA analysts review books and films that have to deal with the CIA. They don't review all of them, but they review ones that they really dislike and ones that they like. And I was astonished when they reviewed Operation Paperclip, and they had very favorable things to say about it, meaning they said Jacobsen, as a reporter, gives the public more information than, I'm paraphrasing, than has ever been revealed before. And then they say this, which is just so CIA, that the public can presently know. I mean, they literally say that. And that, I thought, it actually made me kind of smile. It's like saying, here's a compliment, but you don't know half of it.
Right.
Touche.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to end on this, the Nautilus experiment, because I remember reading about this. It made the news. I was a kid. That this experiment had been conducted with some Navy guys, some cadets, or whatever you call a little guy, locked in a room on the Nautilus and was testing and experimenting with cards. Did this actually happen?
So those in the work are actually completely divided on this story. Some will say it did happen, and others will say it absolutely didn't happen. And it's always interesting to see these mini battles going on within different groups. But I found some documents in the Library of Congress that strongly suggest it did happen, based on the fact that the commander of the Navy was a friend of Marcella DuPont, one of Puharich's leading benefactors. Mm-hmm. And in these letters that looked like they hadn't been read since 1950, she talks about making this introduction between this very powerful member of the U.S. Navy and Puharich. And to me, that was an interesting, albeit speculative, link. But looking at all the documents, I would lean toward the idea that some incantation of those experiments, ESP experiments, did happen.
I think it did too. It made the news. I remember hearing about it, and it was represented to me when I heard it that it was factual, right? And
yes, and the lead, one of the military men involved in it, his initial thing was, "Oh yeah, we did that." It was kind of like, and then immediately he changed his story. And that's where you get into kind of the mythology of Roswell, right?
Right,
you could argue on the other side of the argument, which if suddenly a military person changes their story under, then you interpret that was done under pressure, and so, it's this splintering and fracturing of stories that I think makes them very interesting to look at. And I try and look at them with a bird's eye view, which I think can link us all the way back to the analogy of fake news. What is going on today has been going on for decades. This is tradecraft when it comes to the intelligence community and the United States Department of Defense. And we should never underestimate that what we think we know is only part of the story.
What's your next book? What are you working on now?
I'm going back to hard science and the CIA. That's all I can say.
I know it's going to be great.
And the book is very kinetic.
Is it? Oh,
There's
man.
lots of action in it.
Oh, and you're just going to leave us with that. Thank you so much, Annie. Now, AnnieJacobsen.com is the best place for everybody to not only see what you're doing and where you're speaking and so forth, but they can get Phenomena and all of your books there, right?
Sure thing.
Thank you so much, Annie. Have a great sleep with one eye open now.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you so much, Annie. Annie Jacobsen, everybody. Again, the book is Phenomena, The Secret History of the U.S. Government's Investigations into Extrasensory Perception and Psychokinesis. The website is AnnieJacobsen.com. The links are over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. You can follow Annie on Twitter at Annie Jacobsen. What a conversation tonight. I can't wait for the next book. Annie Jacobsen. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be right back.
Here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies.
I had gout in both my knees, and it's gone.
Well, I'm pretty stupid. I should have ordered it 15 years ago. Best thing I ever got in my... It's the most effective product that I've ever bought in my life.
He had eczema on his hand, and it cracked for years. He did anything from doctor, every cream, everything. And 3 months on the veggies and fruit, it was gone.
They're just awesome. They keep asking me, what am I doing? I told them what I did with my cholesterol. I had the blood test, right? And it went down 100 points. 262, now it's 162. Everything is just perfect.
Call now to find out how to get your free month's supply of Balance of Nature. Call 800-2468-751. That's 800-2468-751. Call now, 800-2468-751. Or go online to balanceofnature.com.
Use promo code TSL.
Would odors, mold, and mildew describe your basement or crawl space? It doesn't have to be that way. Transform them into a fresh, healthy, usable one with the technologically advanced Wave Moisture Control Units. The computerized operation maximizes moisture control and also expels harmful radon, combustion gases, and numerous other pollutants. Dehumidifiers are old technology that do nothing for air quality and waste energy. Wave units are intelligent, self-monitoring, do not need maintenance, and will save you hundreds in electricity. Wave units are still running effectively over 15 years. They've been tested and installed in public and military housing and by property managers nationwide. Buy a unit now, and if your home is not fresher and drier, you can return it for a full refund for up to 12 months. What have you got to lose? Call now. 1-888-618-WAVE. 1-888-618-WAVE. Or visit mydryhome.com. That's mydryhome.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to JimmyChurchRadio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Teppy.
This is Kristen, Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. Thank you, Annie Jacobsen. The book is Phenomenon. AnnieJacobsen.com. Man, it's an unbelievable read. You've got to get the book. Just go to Annie Jacobsen's website. The links are right there at JimmyChurchRadio.com and pick that one up. It is all that. Man, I'm going to say this. The first 60 pages are unbelievable, and it's a setup for the rest of the book. And I'm telling you, you read this and you just find out about the government's research back into this and us. It's absolutely incredible. It's unbelievable. This portion of the show is brought to you by River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Have you seen Carol Peralt's new painting with Fade to Black blend in it? Just go right now. Click on the River Moon Coffee banner over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Use the promo code F2B blend and you will get 15% off of your order. River Moon Coffee is going to be at Contact in the Desert. It's coming up. I can't believe it. It's less than 3 weeks away. Today is the 1st. It is May 19th through the 22nd in Joshua Tree, California. River Moon Coffee is going to be there. You want to be there too. All right. Click on the banners over at JimmyChurchRadio.com for Contact in the Desert, and all of the information that you need is right there. Hotels, food is important, right? They've got great vendors and all of that, but they've also got an amazing cafeteria there too. Okay? All right, and that's the good news. We've got a coffee vendor, a real one, at Contact in the Desert this year. Really looking forward to it. All right, back to phone lines are open. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. A couple of things. I want to back up. We had so much to talk about tonight, and it was back to back for 2 hours. But there was one thing that we spent a little bit of time on, but I want to explain this to you. When we were talking about fake news, Great Britain, Germany, and the United States. This is what was going on back then. The government here in the United States and Great Britain suddenly realized that they could start to put out fake news stories out there to do a few different things. To manipulate us here in the United States, and Great Britain as well, more so here in the United States because we hadn't entered the war yet, but there was more to that. I'll get to that in a second. But influence Germany, because Germany's reading the newspapers too. Germany is listening to the radio. Germany is checking things out. And Hess at that time and Himmler were so into the supernatural. This is what Germany figured out. Great Britain figured out that they could create fake astrological charts that were nearly accurate and that nobody would know the difference. But if they could start publishing this and talk about and predicting the future and events, that would sway Germany. And so what was going on? This is what they did. They actually went and printed a magazine on the paranormal and on psychics in Germany that Germany would see and think that it was an underground publication with this secret information in it and the charts. And as it turned out, now think about this for a second. It actually worked. It freaked Germany out. Printing a fake magazine that was purported to be underground, and the Nazis freaked out. And they started reading the charts and started to dictate what they were doing and reacted to it. How trippy is that? Now, at the same time, they get a psychic over here in the United States, which Annie and I talked about, that was, read by, the numbers are crazy. The numbers are crazy, but read like by 30 million people a day in the United States. Think about that for a second. That kind of influence, 30 million people a day. Think about the population back then, right? So it was like 1 out of every 3, 150 million, 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 Americans were reading this. And the predictions, like we said, it was almost like Nostradamus, that this was being fed by MI5 out of Great Britain into the United States, that this psychic was an agent feeding him information about actual events. He's predicting them in the paper. We are reading it here in the United States, tripping on it, and then 3 or 4 days later, these events actually went down and happened. Think about that for a second. And we're dealing with fake news today, and we are wondering about what is real and what is not. This is something that is real. This actually went on, and they didn't have any issues with it. Think about that. And when we talk about fake news today and mainstream media and the CIA being involved, all of this is just well practiced, well oiled. Think about that. It's an unbelievable story, and it actually went down that way. Back then in World War II, when they were trying to figure out the power of the press, the power of the media, the power of television, newsreels, radio, and the ability to get propaganda out there and fake news was going on at the same time when it was also spy versus spy, right? And they had all of these underground networks that were going on in all of the countries around the world. Everybody was a spy. You didn't know if it was the Gestapo, the United States, if they were Japanese, Great Britain, Germany, France. You just didn't know. You didn't know. And all of this started to get figured out. Think about that. And so moving on, and Annie brought this up, and it's a really, really good point. Then as everybody was starting to figure out how to do this and how to manipulate minds with the press and with mass media and telling half-truths and untruths, Roswell happens. Think about that. It's really, really, really trippy. Now, and then you fold in, by the way, Peter Levena is going to be with us next week. When you go and look at the 9 and what happened there and the connections with the CIA, the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, the Astards, the Youngs, the DuPonts, this huge money that was involved there, and Puharich, who was in the middle of it, this all fits together. When we say that everything is connected, it truly is. It's an unbelievable book. Phenomenon. It is an unbelievable read. And with that, now with all of that is our past and our history, and that we need to study this, and we need to understand why we are where we are today. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Today, Fox News co-president Bill Shine resigned. And he's the latest casualty in this scandal that's plagued Fox and its parent company, 21st Century Fox, since last summer. Shine's departure, announced earlier today, was that he just resigned. Now, this needs to be discussed for a lot of different reasons. Number one, Shine has been with Fox since its inception in 1996. And he was also the right-hand man for their news chief, Roger Ailes. Now, aside from the sex scandals and everything else that Roger Ailes got himself tied up with and Bill O'Reilly got tied up with, And Shine, who was part of the cover-up, and he knew of everything up until this point. He was Ailes' right-hand guy. He knew everything that was going on. That's part of the resigning. But that isn't really the real news here. What does Fox do about its future? Now, going back to the mainstream media, and something that we have been talking about for a few years now on this show, all of this stuff that we have been discussing has come to pass. And what do I mean by that? The bias of all of the networks out there slanting their news coverage in one direction or another is obvious. Now, what happens with Fox now moving forward, now that Ailes and Shine are gone? Are they going to now? We have to deal with the fake news side of things, and it goes across the board. We mentioned Sean Hannity earlier. Sean Hannity got caught, blamed it on his producers, but put fake news out there. Did it? And so that enables us to sit back and go, hey, wait a minute. These mainstream guys here are reporting fake news and then going back and maybe correcting themselves later, but the damage is done. You have caused the emotional movement of your listeners to swing one way or the other. Right? Now, what does this do with the direction of Fox? The reason why I bring that up, obviously CNN is the Democratic news outlet, right? The liberal left, and we have Fox with the extreme far right, and O'Reilly's gone. Ailes is gone. Now Shine is gone. Are they going to continue the path that they started back in 1996, or are they going to change their direction? And I bring that up because over the last couple of weeks, I have noticed a genuine tone change in Fox. And I think that for their dedicated viewer and listener base, that they're kind of tripping right now because I've seen it. Right? The obvious slanting in one direction or another hard for Fox is starting to change. So how is this going to affect moving forward? And are they going to start to take a look at a harder look at the reporting of news that may not necessarily be 100% accurate? And the same goes for CNN, by the way. Now, CNN is not going through these scandals that Fox is. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if something did happen over there. But what if that same shakeup happened? Now, all of this is connected to the correspondence dinner that happened over the weekend. Now, I don't know if you've seen the highlights of it, but the correspondence dinner had a definite tone to it this past weekend. And one of them has been the accusations of fake news by this program and others, and even our sitting president right now, that none of the mainstream media can be trusted and that the correspondents out there can't be trusted anymore. And that theme there was that the freedom of the press and the right of a free press is the foundation of this country, and that they feel that they haven't misrepresented anything. Now, I think that their attitude is accidents can happen. In news, you must, and in journalism, and when you are reporting, you must vet your sources 3 times at a minimum. You've got to vet your source. No matter who's reporting first, right? You need to vet your sources. Now, with that, like anything in the world, accidents can happen. Human error comes into play. But today, the ability to have news out there so rapid fire in your face and so quickly that being first is more important now than it ever has been in the past. And it's always been important to be first with a breaking story. You want to be that guy or that girl that breaks a story first. but you need to vet your sources. And now, because of not only Trump, but Hillary and politicians and police and just everybody's talking about fake news. So now we don't know who to trust. And we've had this huge upset now going down over at Fox and what is happening there, and the correspondents' dinner, where for the first time that I can remember in a while, that our president didn't attend. So what does that say? And now the correspondents and mainstream media are back on their heels, and I get that, and I understand why. So is there going to be a shift change, a paradigm shift in the way that things are reported in the future? Is it going to be more accurate? Is it going to be less biased? Are we going to see, I mean this, are we going to see a shift in CNN? Are we going to see a shift in Fox where that everything starts to move more towards the center and doesn't bias on one side or the other? Now, one thing that I need to make very clear is that although the show isn't about politics, it is about the conspiracy behind politics and the media and the way that we are fed news and the way that all of us need to be very concerned about what we read, what we see, and react in the right way. It's very, very important. I have asked everybody on this show for years to go ahead and read, but don't take it serious. Don't. Or just stop. Just stop with the mainstream media and go with the alternatives. Go with this show. Don't do it at all. Don't follow the narrative at all. All right? So is there going to be a shift in that, in moving forward? How do they fix it? I don't know. I really, I don't know. But watching that correspondence dinner, they are very aware. The numbers are not what they used to be. The numbers are shrinking. Fox or CNN or MSN, any one of those outlets can talk about, their competing numbers today. This is what I want to be clear. They're competing amongst themselves but the numbers are much, much smaller than they ever were, and they're going to continue to shrink. They're going to continue to go down that path. And at the correspondence dinner, it was obvious that everybody is aware. And not having Trump there also spoke volumes. And people react to that. I don't know what the future, I don't know how it holds. I'm not sure. When you look at a couple of things, remember, Al Jazeera network is gone. Al Jazeera, as flashy as it was, and it was backed by a lot of money, and it was considered a mainstream outlet on television, was flashy, had the right reporters and everything, was only pulling 25,000, 30,000 viewers a day. Think about that for a second. Much smaller numbers than this program. And the numbers are shrinking for CNN and Fox every single day. They'll talk about the numbers where they are competing for who is number one, but the pie is shrinking. It's going down. And reversing that and getting it going in the other direction is tough. Why? Because people are now listening to and going to other sources for their news. Programs like this. Now, although our subject and what we do on this program every single day can never be fake news, talking about Egypt or Today with Annie Jacobsen and telekinesis and ESP and the CIA, that's not fake news, right? But when we talk about news on this program, whenever we do it, it is accurate. It's accurate. And people now know that when they hear me and us and our team here put together the news and compile the news together, that it is accurate. And it's not biased one way or the other. It's just reporting the facts. And that's easier for you to digest and to get through this show than it is surviving a CNN news hour or Fox or MSNBC or even your local news, because nobody trusts it anymore. And I don't know if they are going to get those numbers back. I really, really don't. And having this upset, you have to understand why this is so important for all of us. Fox is a big chunk of the pie. And they are, I don't know how they are going to survive this. They certainly will, of course. But their importance is going to diminish unless they demonstrate to everybody else and their dedicated base and everybody else that doesn't watch Fox that they can be trusted and that the organization behind the news is solid and credible and moral. And that's a tough thing for Fox to overcome. And in general, mass media in general and the news in general has a huge black eye on it. And that black eye was not partially is caused by them, but it was caused by 100% genuine fake news that was fiction and created. But they, not doing their due diligence, reported on fake news like it was real. Do you see the cycle that's going on here? It's absolutely incredible. And then when you throw in, to the point of this entire diatribe, you throw in all of this, the fact that the government has been doing this to us for 70 years. We have evidence going back to World War II all the way up to today about fake news for their agenda. It's crazy. You know, and I was reading something today. I was reading a blog today that was literally, like word for word, a show we did a couple of months ago on George Orwell in 1984 and the Ministry of Truth. It is spot on the money. Today, that is the problem that mass media has in Washington, D.C., that you and the rest of the world and all of us now recognize that we can't trust anything that we read. We were trusting up to a point, but the bottom fell out on everything in 2016. So I don't know. This shakeup at Fox is a big deal. It is a big deal. I don't know how they're going to move forward. I don't know if they're going to move closer to the center. I don't know if they're going to concentrate on unbiased reporting and opinions. I don't know if Hannity's going to wake up, and I keep mentioning, but he's like the top of the heap now there. So it's a crazy time that we're in. CNN right there. But we recognize, and that's, again, back to this diatribe. We've been talking about it on this show for almost 4 years. And all of it has come to pass. All of it. Everything happened just like we called it. It's pretty fascinating, isn't it? And then to sit here and speak with Annie Jacobsen tonight about this and how it has gone on in the biggest of events, okay, the biggest, World War II, and taking advantage of the media worldwide with fake reporting. Think about that, and nobody knew. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. This has been another Fade to Black. Tomorrow night, right here, Caroline Corey is on her new documentary, which you can go, if you go over to jimmychurchradio.com right now and click, you can go over to Caroline's website, check out the trailer. The documentary is incredible. You do need to watch it, okay? God's Among Us. The point for me in this is, and I haven't seen this in quite a while, there is some fascinating new stuff here that will cause everyone to think. It's an excellent, slickly produced, the visual side of it is exciting. Caroline's always done that with her documentaries. But there's some information here that for me, I sat back and went, wow, this is something that everybody needs to see. And we'll cover all of that tomorrow night on the show. This has been Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I want to thank Annie Jacobsen once again. You can follow Annie at Annie Jacobsen on Twitter. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Jonas, thank you, Dennis, thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Drew, the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication, KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2017 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Tepe.